basically I want to read all the books that are on that list. Car horn. It's a day that ends in a Y, so somebody's car horn's going off. Basically. No. That's not what it is. I've done two videos on my most anticipated books of this year. Sloan? Hi everyone, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today's video is going to be the mid-year freakout tag, and I know this has been going around, I feel like for a couple weeks now, so I'm definitely late to the game. I was out in California on vacation, and to be perfectly honest, I've had like a really hard time sort of getting back in the groove and like feeling creative enough to film and feeling the desire to film. And I feel like anytime you go on vacation, you have sort of that like post-vacation like funk where it's just sort of like, okay, it's over now, and you have to do all the annoying things like laundry and like getting back to normal and getting back to your routine. But at the same time, I'm still like in daydream mode. So my head has been like everywhere but back in the groove. I've been watching people's videos. I'm ready to film some stuff. So let's start with this one. Okay, so the first one is the best book I've read so far in 2019. And no surprise, I'm gonna have two different options for this one. And if you've been following my channel, these probably also won't be a total surprise. But I'm gonna go with Beartown by Frederick Bachman and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So I read both these books this year, obviously. I read Beartown back in January and I read Evelyn Hugo in April. And I was totally blown away by both of these books. And these were both the first books I read by each of these authors. So I won't go into huge detail on either of them because we'll be here for 100 years and I've already talked about them. I did a dedicated video on Beartown. Long story short, it is incredible writing. It is beautiful storytelling. It is amazing characters. Frederick Bachman crafts a story like nobody's business. I was so surprised by this. This is about a small town in Sweden, like hyper focused on hockey. It's all about the hockey players and the hockey team. And one of the hockey players sexually assaults one of the girls in his high school. And this book is about sort of everything building up to that moment and then the aftermath and the town divide and sides that they take and the repercussions and all of it. And it is just beyond incredible. Cannot say enough amazing things about this book. And then when we get to Evelyn Hugo, I mean, again, it just completely blew me away. And this book came out, I guess in 2018. I think this one came out in 2018. And Evelyn Hugo is a fictional Hollywood movie star, and she's in her 80s now and has decided to finally tell her story. And she tells it through her seven husbands to a reporter. And we are seeing things in present tense. We are seeing things through flashbacks. It is much like Frederick Bachman, beautifully written characters, beautifully written story. I was completely sucked in by this. I power read this book. Like I couldn't get enough of it. I cried. My heart ached. I love Evelyn. I love everyone in her world. She is like unlikable at times, but completely like in love with her. There's great rep in this book. There's just great storytelling. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. The next question is, what is the best sequel that you read? And I actually only have read 2 sequels so far this year, so it's not like I've got a lot of choices, but I will say hands down, even if I read 10 sequels or 20 sequels, I think this would still be my favorite. And it's Us Against You by Frederick Bachman, which is the sequel to Beartown. And I just finished this in June. And it was one of these things, and I'll talk about it more in my June wrap-up, but I had such a fear that the sequel would sort of ruin Beartown for me because I just didn't think it could get any better than that. And that book was just so incredible, and it wrapped up in a way that it could be a standalone, so it has a very satisfying ending. But Frederick Bachman has managed to sort of make me love this story even more than I did in the first place. My heart broke so many times with this book, as I did with Beartown. I cried like a baby reading this book. And sometimes I was happy and sometimes I was sad and sometimes it was just the full-on emotion of it all. This book, incredible. Do not hesitate to pick it up if you have read Beartown. I don't think you'll be disappointed, and this absolutely adds to an already incredible story. So he just, I mean, you talk about writer envy again. I kind of want to be him. The next prompt is, what is a new release that you haven't read yet but want to? And I have done 2 videos on 2019 new releases. So basically I want to read every book on that list, except for one that I've heard bad things about. But some of them haven't come out yet. I got a bunch of them, which are on my iPad through like some crazy iBook sales, which I talked about in a whole other video. So basically I want to read all of those, but we're going to pick one for the sake of the video, and I'm going to pick one that I actually have a hard copy of, which is Alifair Burke's The Better Sister. I did a dedicated video on Alifair Burke too. I love her. I'm so excited to read this book. It's definitely a little bit different than previous books that she's done. Or no, well, she did like a whole like detective series and then sort of went into more like psychological thrillers and domestic thrillers. So this is probably more the domestic thriller bit. But basically there's 2 sisters. One of them is married and her husband dies, and the other sister used to date that guy. So like a lot of people, I don't like to know a lot about my thrillers. I got this good deal on Amazon. I've had it for like a month or so, maybe even a little bit longer than that, but I'm super excited to read it. So we'll see if I can maybe make this happen in July, but either way, excited to read it. It will happen at some stage of the game. The next question is, what is your most anticipated release for a book that hasn't come out yet? And again, we can reference those 2 videos I did because not everything has come out yet. But I will say, hands down, I am so excited, most excited about The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, which comes out in September. And this is the sequel to Handmaid's Tale. Handmaid's Tale, which came out in 1985. I read it in college. It was the first Margaret Atwood book I ever read. I've talked about this before. It made me fall in love with her as a writer. The story completely shook me. I just reread it in June. So you'll see more about that in my June wrap-up also, as part of April from Getting Huggy With It's The Handmaid's Tale 2019 kind of read along. And it's such an incredible book, and I am so curious to see what Margaret Atwood does with this. And, you know, she's talked about this in interviews. She really wrote the book in response to, you know, kind of what's still happening in the world and how relevant The Handmaid's Tale still is. There obviously was huge success with the Hulu series, and she swears that it's going to answer all of our reader questions that we've been asking since 1985 about what happened to Offred and sort of what the next chapter in that story is. So like, I can't wait. The next prompt is, what was your most disappointing read of the year? And honestly, I had a few of them, which is just sort of the way things go. But one that stuck out to me the most was Jane Doe by Victoria Helen Stone. And I own the book. It's just tucked away somewhere, so I'm not going to fish it out. But I did talk about this in one of my rewinds. But basically, Jane is a woman on a revenge mission, and she is sort of a self-described sociopath. She is out to get this guy Stephen, and he has no idea why. So over the course of the story, we start to, you know, we find out what motivates Jane. But basically, and this is always, you know, back cover stuff, she gets a job at this like Midwest insurance company and inserts herself into this guy Stephen's life. And he's like, I think like somewhat senior in the company, and basically like inserts herself like into his family, into his world, into his bed, the whole 9, with the mission being like to get revenge on him at any cost and to destroy his life. And he has no idea what's coming. And the reviews were like, it's like gripping and like this bang of an ending and like so gripping and so chilling and like total suspense and all of this stuff. And it like read amazingly from reviews and back cover copy and all of that stuff. And it really just fell flat for me. And I talked about this in my review. I felt like there was a huge opportunity for the author to like really go for it and just go down the crazy train. And she didn't do it. And I felt like she just played it safe. And as much as like Jane is unlikable in ways, she wanted to keep her likable at the end, and it just didn't have like this big pow ending for me. So I've read better books than this. I am not done on Victoria Helen Stone. I actually just got one of her newer books, which I also talked about in like an ebook haul video. So I'm not done with her. I did enjoy the writing. I enjoyed parts of Jane. I just felt like there was a great opportunity to really just take it to another level, and the author didn't do it. So that let me down. And then, probably unpopular opinion, the other one, and this hurts my heart to say it, is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. And I loved Final Girls. Like, that was the first book by him I read. Just devoured it, loved it, amazing, like all of it. And then I loved Lock Every Door, which just came out, and I did a whole video on that. Same. Gripping, great storytelling, amazing characters, amazing suspense, like just this wild, crazy ride that you're on, great atmosphere. And I think I just had such high expectations for The Last Time I Lied, which I read, I think like back in February. And there were elements of it that I liked, but I found some of it sort of like a little hard to believe, and some of it I felt like it was just like a little obvious. It just didn't like thrill me the same way, which hurts me to say. And I think because I had such high expectations after Final Girls, I just expected this to be another grand slam, and it wasn't for me. But what I found listening to a lot of people's reviews, there are people who loved Last Time I Lied but didn't love Final Girls. So, you know, again, different strokes for different folks. But I was a little bummed, and I'm also bummed to admit it. The next prompt is, what is a book that surprised you? And I was looking through my list, and there were actually a lot of books that surprised me, which is great because I've been trying really hard to read outside of my normal comfort zone and to read new authors, to read new genres, and to not just sort of stick with my fan faves and thrillers, which is where I like to live a lot of my life. So I've branched out and have been really pleasantly surprised by a lot of books that I've been reading. And to kind of narrow it down, the first one is This Adventure Ends by Emma Mills. And this is a YA book, which is really outside of my normal reading zone. And it is about this girl named Sloane who moves to Florida with her family. And it starts like the book starts a couple weeks into her being in the new school. And it is really how she's kind of like a self-proclaimed loner, but she gets kind of grabbed into this friend group, and it is about their relationships and sort of her life with these friends and kind of this mission that she goes on, and her relationship with her dad, which I've talked about, which I loved. It's very Keith Veronica Mars to me, but there's no element of mystery to this book. And I loved it so much more than I expected it to. And one of the things that I loved is it's like there's no cliche stuff, there's no catfighting, there's no like girls hating on girls and like this bullying stuff. It is really these true beautiful friendships between these friends, and it is Sloane opening up and letting down walls that she has had up for a really long time. And it's the relationship with her family and her parents and her sister, and I just loved it. I just loved it. And then the other one, because of course I have to give you guys a thriller, is 13 by Steve Kavanaugh. And I picked this book up purely for kind of the tagline of the serial killer isn't on trial, he's on the jury, which is all I needed to know. And I devoured this book. And I mean, this book gave me nightmares. This was a book that I couldn't read before I went to bed because it was that freaking creepy. And we get it from the serial killer's perspective. We get it from the attorney's perspective. And this is a book, it actually is the fourth in a series, which I didn't realize when I bought it, but you could read it as is because there's enough clues about sort of characters who are recurring from the past. But I am going to go back to the beginning and read it from the start. But this is a book about a Hollywood actor who is on trial for murdering his wife and his bodyguard, who apparently were having an affair. And it is a wild ride. So there is courtroom stuff to this. And I haven't read like a real courtroom book in a while, and I used to love them, and I just sort of drifted for whatever reason. So I loved kind of being back in that lawyer courtroom prep, arena, so to speak. And then there's a whole mess of it that's from the serial killer side, and he is one messed up dude. So like this book was incredible and blew me away, and I couldn't recommend it more. The next prompt is, who is your favorite new author? And it doesn't have to be a debut author, but just someone who was new to you this year. And I have so many because I've read so much that I normally wouldn't read. So like Frederick Bachman, Taylor Jenkins Reid, Steve Kavanaugh, 100%, like obsessed with him now. And John Mars, who wrote The One, which is a book I read back in January, which I talked about, obviously, in that review. And that was another, it's kind of like a sci-fi thriller. And I am like hooked on him. Like I read that in 24 hours, basically, like started it one night and was done with it, within 24 hours. It's such a crazy book about, sort of upping the game, about how it's not just about like Match.com and sort of eHarmony and these websites, but that you actually can be matched to your true soulmate through your DNA. And the story takes place kind of years after this DNA matching has been sort of active, so to speak. And sort of the hitch is you only get your match if your match participates in it. So obviously not everybody in the world is participating in it. For those who have and are finding their true matches, it's like people are getting divorced, people are moving, people are leaving their families, people are finding out that maybe they are matched with same-sex couples, maybe they are matched with serial killers, maybe they are matched with their friends' husbands or wives, or like whatever it is, or people who live all across the world. Like it's wild. And you see it from 5 different people's perspectives. It's alternating chapters. It moves at such a great clip. I couldn't flip pages fast enough. I'm so excited to read more John Mars. So good. The next prompt is your new fictional crush. And like a lot of people, I don't really get fictional crushes, I feel like. I did at some stage, but I can't think of anyone who there's characters that I love, but I'm gonna have to take a hard pass on the fictional crush one. I feel like I fall more in love with people in like movies and TV now, which I've always done. And there's, again, tons of characters I liked, but yeah, wah wah. I don't have a fictional crush answer. The next prompt is, who is your newest favorite character? And again, I was looking through the list of the books I read, and there's so many characters that I fell in love with this year, and so many characters that I was like rooting for and just like want more of them. But narrowing it down to one, and sort of reinforced by the fact that I just finished reading Us Against You, I have to say Benji from Beartown and Us Against You. Just absolutely, I loved him in Beartown. Just loved him. He is the best friend of kind of the star player of the hockey team, and they grew up together, and he just has such a pivotal role in that story. And he's in Us Against You, obviously. None of that is spoiler stuff, but he is complex, and he is compelling, and he has extremely interesting relationships with his family and with his friends and with the town and with himself. And he just like moved me to tears so many times. Like, I feel like I'm going to cry now just talking about it. He's just such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful character. And I love him. I love how Frederick Bachman wrote him. He does unlikable things sometimes. He does wonderful things at times. He just is like, I will cheer for Benji until I lose my voice. I love him. And I guess like if I could have a fictional crush, even though it wouldn't work out between us, plus I'm a little bit too old for him, he would probably be it. The next question is, what is a book that made you cry? And I've been pretty weepy this year, so I feel like the better question would be like, what book didn't make you cry? But basically, like everything I've mentioned, like Evelyn Hugo, Beartown, Us Against You, Love in Other Words, First Comes Love by Emily Giffin, This Adventure Ends. Like basically go back and watch all the videos that I made about books that I read this year, and even like in some of the thrillers, there were moments where I like might have shed a tear. Every Taylor Jenkins Reid book has made me cry. It's been like a weepy year, and not always in like a sad way, but like such moving, beautiful writing in so many of these books. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine made me cry. Girl Made of Stars made me cry. Like just literally, basically at least 50, if not 60% of the books I read this year brought a tear to my eye. The next question is the most beautiful book that you bought this year. And again, there's like a lot of them that I think are pretty. Part of my problem is a lot of books that I read I bought last year, but I read them this year. So we're gonna cheat. And I'm gonna say one of them is Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier, which I fully bought last year. But I think it's just totally beautiful. And spoiler alert, you already know this. I loved this book. She's another new to me writer. Loved thriller, dark. Like this is a book that was like dark and messed up and went there, which is also why I loved it. And then Just to Resurrect This Adventure Ends. I think this is a beautiful book as well. Daisy Jones and the Six, I think, is a beautiful book. There's just so many of them that I just love. I already showed you guys Daisy Jones, but in case you forgot, I did buy the UK edition because I thought this one was beautiful inside and out. I'm only bummed I didn't get like the special Waterstones one that had all the black edging, but still love this one as well. The next prompt is, what is a book that made you happy? And it's funny, I was looking at my list and I was like, wow, I read like a lot of dark thrillers. I read a lot of sad books. And I think there are definitely like moments of like Beartown and Us Against You that really did make me happy, even though it also like shattered me to bits 100 times over. But to add another one to the list, I would say Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. First Christina Lauren book I read. This is sort of a contemporary adult romance. I also loved it. It also brought me to complete tears, sometimes in a happy way, sometimes in a heartbreaking way. But ultimately, there was so much about this book that made me happy. So this was definitely kind of like a feel good. And again, I guess if I think like about a crush, Elliot, I had to go look at his name because I thought it was Ethan. Elliot is another one who maybe would be a crush. So let me just back answer that question one more time. And the last prompt is a book that you want to read before the end of the year, which is like, come on people, there's more than one book I want to read before the end of the year. I have the rest of my 2019 reread challenge, which I set for myself. So I had picked 13 books, so I still have 7 to go. We're just gonna see how it goes. I'm not gonna put a ton of pressure on myself. There are books that I definitely want to read, but what I'm finding as I am opening myself up to new writers and new genres is that my attention is literally like all over the place. And I obviously made that list in December thinking I was gonna be in like this very structured zone and just sort of like reading what I was comfortable with. So we'll see. But there's Margaret Atwood is on that list, The Robber Bride. I didn't plan to, no, that's a lie. I did plan to reread Handmaid's Tale, but that wasn't on the list. There's a Marian Keyes book on that list. There's an Olivia Goldsmith. I want to reread Devil Wears Prada. There's a Susan Isaacs book on that list. So I'll link that video down below if you haven't seen it. But I'm just trying to revisit some old favorites and see if they still are old favorites. These are books that I talked about that I've moved from like state to state and like house to house and all that good stuff and won't let them go because there is some sentimental reason why I'm holding on to them. And I'm finding as I'm rereading them, some of them still completely knock it out of the park for me, and others I'm just sort of like, oh, okay, like I get why I loved it at the time, but I don't have the same love that I had probably when I read it the first time around. So I have that entire list. I basically have like all the new releases that I want to read. I already talked about the Testaments that I want to read. Sweet Pea, just right here, is another one that I totally want to read, as is so Sweet Pea, which is basically, she's a serial killer. She's like, the last person who called me Sweet Pea ended up dead. This is American Psycho meets Fleabag, which, hello, I cannot wait to read this. Coincidentally, on top of that, which is another one I want to read, is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, which is supposed to be very kind of secret history-ish, which I am someone who loved secret history. So like, this is one I want to read. In the like, who am I? What am I buying? I heard so much about Verity by Colleen Hoover that I picked this up. So I definitely want to read this. Like, this is, again, something I never would have picked up if I hadn't been on BookTube or been watching BookTube. None of these are authors that I would have known about or probably have picked up. So the list goes on and on and on. So there we go. There's the freak out tag. I'm not really freaked out though. So I don't know why it's even called the mid-year freak out tag. But anyway, I am super pleased with kind of where I'm at reading wise this year. Like I said, I've read so many new authors, so many great books. a couple bummers in there, but whatever, that's life. And I'm fine with it because I'm glad I read them and now I know. And it's all part of the journey of being a reader. But like I said, I am very late to the game in this tag, but feel free to comment down below because you know I love to talk in the comments about any of these prompts, or if you did this video, definitely link it down below so I can check yours out if I haven't seen it already. But let me know what was the most beautiful, or what made you laugh, or new authors, or what you're looking forward to this year. Feel free to answer any of the questions down below so we can chit chat. And I am back. I'm a little bit wonky still. More videos to come. So thank you guys for watching. Anyone who was new here today, thank you for joining me. And hopefully I will see you all back here again really soon. So have a great day, everybody. Bye.